Welcome back to Sledgehammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Now, today I am joined by the amazing Robert Stewart. Robert, how you doing today, man?
I am doing very well. How are you today?
I am doing very well. Very excited for this. We got to talk for a little bit before we actually started rolling and getting to know you and some of the things that make you tick. And that's
We
funny
got a
because
lot in common.
we absolutely do. And before we get started on why you're here, I would like for the people that don't know you to get to know you a little bit. You've been a lifelong fan of horror since you were very, very young. You were watching 80s slashers back then, which obviously we will be talking about one of those today, ironically. Very young when you still shouldn't have been. But you are just a big pop culture guy in general, covering comic books, horror movies, wrestling. And you have SWO Productions, Stew World Order. Can you tell people a little bit about SWO, Stew World Order, and what you do over there?
Yeah, so the podcast itself I have is the Stew World Order. So if you want to look up the podcast, it's under Stew World Order, and we review random comic book movies. And whenever I say that, I mean, I have a big list of comic book movies. Like, it's currently 1 to 90, but that's with my having gone through 80 some movies. And I'll have a guest on and I'll say, give me 3 numbers, and I'll tell them what 3 movies from the list they pulled with those numbers, and then they choose the one that they want to talk about on the show. And we're really even-handed on the show. We give movies ups and downs, and then we give it our rating out of 10. So no matter how much I love or hate something, it gets ups and downs. We've done Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which is arguably my favorite movie ever, and having to find 2 downs for that movie was just heartbreaking. And at the same time, I've done stuff like the Catwoman movie with Halle Berry, and trying to find ups for that movie was really a struggle. So it's a really neat exercise of just trying to find balance in everything. And every movie has positive and negative qualities. But then in addition to the podcast, I have the website, which is swoproductions.com. And there it's, I don't want to say entirely free form, but it's a lot of different stuff. It's television show reviews where we go episode by episode on shows. I'm watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer for the first time ever, and I'm doing episode by episode reviews of it. I have an entire series that's got to be 40 to 50 articles long at this point, where I'm just reviewing every flavor of Pop-Tarts I can get my hands on. And
I was just gonna say, you not just write about that, you write about even Pop-Tarts. I was just gonna mention that, man.
Yeah, so the big wrestling pay-per-views that come out, I do reviews on those. Other wrestling goings on, I'll report on. Comic book reviews, I do a lot of new movie stuff. Like I just recently wrote articles on Barbie and Oppenheimer because I saw them the week they came out. So yeah, at the website, it's a lot of everything. We even have fiction going on right there. I have a buddy of mine, Aaron, who writes for me, and he has this whole shared universe that he's building, and I have much less time for the fiction writing, but I'm trying. I have my own story that's like 7 or 8 chapters in at this point. But yeah,
That's
there's
awesome.
just a lot of stuff going on over there.
That's awesome. And you talk about all the pop culture things that you write about, and like you said, you're a big professional wrestling fan. I gotta know, because I've been watching pro wrestling for 37 years. I've never seen a heel as dominant with the crowd as Dirty Dom Mysterio. Can you think of a heel that's ever gotten the reaction that he's gotten?
Maybe at some point. It's hard. I'm trying to think, like,
because I mean, like,
maybe
you have like the $1 Million Man, and Ted
yeah.
DiBiase was a fantastic heel, but there was still people in that crowd that loved him. You still had people holding up the $1 Million belt. You still had people that would money, like people. You know what I mean? Like, I've never seen anybody that's been like, I love Dirty Dom. I love Dominic. And, watching him, I'm always so impressed with the way that it takes somebody very special to be able to get the crowd to turn on you the way that he has. And I think we're watching something special here in front of us. And every week when I tune in and I see him try to talk and the crowd boo him out, I'm like, this is phenomenal. This reminds me of Steve Austin's What? Or Kurt Angle's You Suck.
Yeah.
Those are the things I hear when I hear Dom, but just at such a bigger level. So I was just curious if you had in your mind a heel that could ever rival what Dom's doing right now.
Not to the degree that you're talking about, where people didn't also like them to some degree.
Right.
Like, maybe if I had several minutes to think it over, but yeah, not off the top of my head. Like, occasionally you'll have like the baby face character that gets pushed to death, like the first several months of Rocky Maivia, maybe, but he
Oh
wasn't a
yeah.
heel. He wasn't a heel. And then we saw what he could do. And maybe that's what it is with Dom. Maybe like he was a baby face and people were just like, he's this scrawny kid. He's just Ray's kid. He doesn't really deserve to be here. And so after kind of like we're going to push him as a good guy for a while, they've turned him heel now and we can actually see what he can do. And
Right.
yeah, his stuff is so entertaining.
Love
His
it.
stuff, Roman stuff, and the whole bloodline. I mean, it's really been making WWE for the last 2 or 3 years. And yeah,
Mhm.
I get a kick out of Dom and all the stuff he does with Rhea. She's so super into this storyline, and
Yeah.
she's just helping him get so over.
I love it. And like I said, I agree. Like the Rocky Maivia when he was the blue with the stuff, like that was putrid. But it's just I could spend this whole time talking about WWE wrestling and how it's grown and
You
how
know
it's
who,
become more of a
it just came to me who might have been up there in kind of the same realm of just like hated heels that like nobody thought were even cool. Maybe the Spirit Squad.
oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, maybe.
Because they were, which is funny because all of them had such. I mean, obviously you have Dolph Ziggler,
Mm-hmm.
Kenny. He obviously had his problems, but he was a phenomenal athlete. But you're right. Like when you had those guys all together, you were like, oh, for fuck's sake, come on. And
Yeah,
then you remember they
these
put the
five
gold on them.
losers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they put. Oh, you're like, are you serious? Right? They put the gold on these guys, but
Yeah.
um, and these are the things that obviously pro wrestling talk, comic book talk, horror talk, any type of pop culture talk. If you guys are into that, which if you're here, you might be, make sure that you are following Robert on all the social media links. Make sure you're subscribing to the podcast and checking out the website. All the links are down in the description, so you don't have to go far to find any of them. And I promise you, he will appreciate it, and so will you once you listen to what he does. So, in
I
order
will appreciate it. So thank you so much for bringing all that up. I really dig that. Yeah, I work really hard. So if anybody takes time to check anything out, I super love it. So just let me know what you think about anything. Always happy to constructive criticism, adjust anything like that. I just love people getting into it because it takes up a lot of time, as I'm sure you know.
Well, and that's part of why I love to do this. One, I grew up in a video store, so learning how horror started for other people is super amazing to me. And like I said, I've done episodes with people that have done podcasts with one episode. I've done episodes with the Dead Meat podcast, and I think of those episodes the exact same. I genuinely love them. And if I can get one person to listen to your podcast, I feel like I've done my job. That's what's special to me. If I can, put people in your direction, try to show them the amazing things that you're doing, that really does help me too, because it makes me feel like I'm doing my job. So, in order
Your
for you to talk
show
about horror, no,
your
go ahead.
show in that regard, before we get into the movie or anything, it's actually a lot like my show because I mentioned how I have the random list and I have guests on, and it's the same thing for me where every single episode there's a guest on and they're either another podcaster or somebody creative, whether it's a writer or an
Mhm.
artist or other people that do video work like you do. And it's the same thing on my end. It's my job, I figure, as the host of my show to get everybody else over and make sure they look as good as possible and make sure people come out of my show going off to see what they can do.
Sure.
So I dig it, man. That's what I think I'm here for too.
Well, and there's another reason. Hopefully, maybe in the future, you'll see Ashley and Ken of Sledgehammer Horror over at the SWO show. So that's something I think would be really, really fucking cool too. So, yeah, in order for horror to, for you to have a platform about horror at all, horror had to start for you somewhere, man. So, Robert, I would like to go back to the past and talk about what got you started in the horror genre, your first horror movie, and the first horror movie that you watched was.
The first one I recall watching at length was Friday the 13th, Part 7.
My first crush, Lar Park Lincoln. um, this is amazing because I love this movie, and this movie is still so important today. Have you seen Roseblood, the Friday the 13th fan film?
I haven't seen Roseblood. I've seen Never Hike Alone, Never Hike in the Snow. I've never seen Roseblood. I've seen I can't remember what it's called, the one that's Jason versus Michael Myers. But
Yeah.
no, not
Um,
Roseblood.
Roseblood is one of my great friends, Peter Anthony. He put this film together. It's actually available on YouTube. And Lar Park Lincoln comes back and reprises her role in the
Oh,
film as Tina.
that's
So
excellent.
it continues the story of Friday the 13th Part 7 with some really awesome Easter eggs. So I really awesome Easter eggs. So I can't recommend that one enough. So do you remember about how old you were the first time you had seen The New Blood?
I had to have been 7 or 8 because it came out in, what was it, 87 or 88?
80, I want to say 88.
Okay. And I saw it at the drive-in, so it had to be newish when I saw it. And I think that's why it stuck with me, as we can get more into the story of it. But I know when I was younger, I had seen like Poltergeist, or I had seen other Friday the 13th movies, but like I was little enough that I don't really have memories of them.
Sure.
I just know that I saw them. But I distinctly remember being in the car at the drive-in, which for the last 30 years has been a Walmart and is not a drive-in anymore. And I know, there's so few of them. And my stepdad being in the back seat of the car, like hiding behind the passenger seat where I was sitting and doing like the to try and like creep me out while I'm watching this movie.
Fucking awesome. See, I think that's the job of dad, stepdad, uncle, brother. Make sure that when you're watching a horror movie for the first time, I mean, even as a kid, I would do that. You know, we'd be at the house and somebody would watch The Ring, and then you'd call. You know, you do that shit. Like, that's just something that we've all done. So we know you were fairly young with your parents at the drive-in watching this film, but do you remember which scene it was that affected you the most?
It was definitely, I mean, Jason with a machete, Jason with, you know, knives or whatever, all very scary. Jason with an axe, terrifying. Jason is a scary dude. But Jason with that weird ass, like spinning buzzsaw blade on a stick. I don't know what it was. It was such a great visual. And I always had that image stuck in my head of just him wielding that thing when he's going after Tina's mom and the doctor and everything. Yeah. And he's just so terrifying because it's, you know, the last thing he needs is like an automated weapon of all things. Right. Like he's terrifying enough. And now you give him something that he barely even has to wield.
Right. You know, and I believe it is a weed whacker. It's just like a weird type of weed whacker in the film. That's the only time he's ever used like a gas-powered weapon like that I can think of. You know, because I rewatch these movies when I am about to do this interview, so that way they're fresh on my mind. And you see him in that moment, and you're right, he's scary. And right before that, Dr. Cruz, that dickhead, uses Tina's mom as a shield to save himself from Jason. It's just like, this is one of the, and also he reprises his role in Roseblood, if that tells you anything. I know he dies in this.
I was gonna say, I'm assuming it's flashbacks, but he'd be very old.
Remember Tina's brain.
Oh, that's true. So that's true. Yeah.
It's really cool. I can't recommend Roseblood enough. I also will have that link down in the description too, guys. So that way you can check that out if you haven't. We'll follow the story right from part 7 to Roseblood. So, you know, that moment when you see that is one of those moments where you're just like, wow, I'm seeing something special now. And obviously we all know what the MPAA did with this film. It was butchered beyond a travesty, but you know, that's one of those moments that really sticks out to you because you get to see him chopping through this guy's stomach with a weed whacker, which is something we always wanted to see at a young age, especially, is like the more creative, the better. And I feel like that's something. And this is a movie that is still super iconic to this day. What would you say your favorite scene from the film is?
You know what? I really still to this day like part 7. I'm still a really big fan. I did an entire video series with buddies of mine, another podcast, The Pint, a pop culture podcast. On their website, we did just every single episode or every single movie. We did like an hour-and-a-half video on. And I remember talking about part 7, and John and Larry weren't big fans of it. And I was just like, no, because here's the thing about this movie. You get into the last half an hour of this movie, and it's insane. It goes from being a horror movie to an action movie, and it just works so seamlessly, where the movie before they had basically given Jason a power-up, and now you're at this point where, okay, as just a bald dude, he was killing the hell out of people. Now we've made him even stronger and more invincible. How do we give him a challenge? And they just went like, oh, okay, I know the premise is like, oh, we're going to have him fight Carrie. My comic book brain always thought is like, he's going to fight Jean Grey, but whichever it is, he's fighting Jean Grey from the X-Men all of a sudden at the end. And it's so exciting seeing this big unstoppable monster who for 6 movies, everyone just had to survive him. You didn't beat him. You just had to survive him somehow. And now we have somebody who is toe-to-toe fighting him. And you know, you've got the sleeping bag scene in this movie, which is iconic and got parodied in the equally great Jason X. And you have what to this day still the longest controlled burn ever with Kane Hodder in the basement. I think it's just such a great movie. And yeah, for I mean a particular scene, it's hard to just get out of like the last 20 minutes because it's just a big fight that you've never seen Jason have to that point.
And the part where, you know, she's choking him and then he breaks through and you see his face, like that moment, you're like, oh, damn. Like,
yeah.
That's fucking gnarly, man.
Yeah, like compare how badass he looks without his hockey mask in this one to how ludicrous he looks without it in the next movie.
Yeah.
Like he
or
looks
even back
terrifying.
In part 3, you know, in part 3, it's like,
yeah, when they make him just a derpy, weird-looking guy with disabilities, that kind of makes me a little uncomfortable. But here, it's like, oh, no, he's a monster. I feel fine about that.
Right. Thank you, part 6, for Frank and Jason. We appreciate it.
Yes.
So, you know, we obviously, if we're talking about the whole franchise, this is a franchise much like life. It has its peaks and valleys. You know, like there are definitely your ups and downs in a franchise like this. We know part 7 was your first, but what would you say your favorite Friday the 13th film is?
Depending on the day, it's 6 or 2.
Okay.
Because two is so weird to me because you know 2 was rushed. You know 2 was rushed to capitalize and make more money. But when you're watching them all, 2 is easily the most professionally, most technically well made. The characters are fleshed out the most. It's not just about Jason. It's about Ginny and Paul and Ted and all these characters that you actually enjoy and care about. And so I just think 2 is great. And then conversely with 6, what I like about 6 is, I'm blanking on the director's name, but he came in and he just got the assignment. He's like, I'm making the 6th part of a horror movie. We're going to make this a comedy because it has to be. It's so stupid that we're making the 6th part of a horror movie about this guy in a hockey mask that he just didn't care about making it funny and silly with the James Bond theme at the beginning. Like, come on, he got the assignment. And to a degree, I defend Jason X the same way. I'm like, these people knew, like, we're shooting Jason into space. Like, we've got to just take the piss with this movie. And so you've got the guy like, hey guys, he just wanted his machete back. I think that's the
easily
best line.
The best part of the film.
Yes.
Easily to me. See, because where you defend Jason X like that, my 2 favorites are 6 and 9, Jason Goes to Hell.
Oh, okay.
And I will defend Jason Goes to Hell to the end of the earth and back. I fucking love that. I mean, I love that movie. So that's how I am with, like I said, for me with Jason X, or for Jason Goes to Hell, it's like we've had 1 through 7 where you're all taking place at a camp, and then you tried something different where you went to Manhattan. And it would have been way better if you actually spent more time in Manhattan. And then they were like, let's just see how crazy we can make this. Oh, what can we do? Let's incorporate Evil Dead. Let's incorporate Nightmare on Elm Street. Let's make a batshit crazy movie. You have a first-time director in Adam Marcus who had only done music videos at this time, young kid. And then you have people coming to him like, get that fucking, you know, Sean Cunningham's like, you get that fucking hockey mask out of my fucking movie. So I love it. I love that movie so much. I think it's so great. I love the Evil Dead shtick. I love the ending where you have Freddy's glove taking Jason's mask down to hell. Like, that's so brilliant. And the meta-ness in it. When you have Kane Hodder as a security guard, and he's this guy's a big pussy in there. You know, like the stuff like that to me was just so fantastic. So
let me ask you about Jason Goes to Hell, because I have a 3,500 word article that I wrote on my website about the multiple Jasons theory and why I think like there are multiple Jasons throughout the franchise and none of them are a boy who drowned in Camp Crystal Lake. But I get to a point where I say, here's how Jason Goes to Hell works for me, because I look at it as the first 8 movies are essentially canon. That's, you know, one continuous storyline that has time jumps, but, you know, every movie picks up where the last one left off. And how I look at part 9 is a movie they made about Jason inside the Jason universe. So like Jason Goes to Hell is a movie that the characters from the first 8 movies could go watch. Like when he went to New York and died, everyone was like, oh shit, there's this Jason guy. And so inside the Jason universe, they made a movie about this monster. And they didn't really know anything about him. So they just made this movie and they're like, yeah, might as well be a knife that can kill him, and maybe he's an evil worm. And I just think like it works that way to me. It works like if you think of it as it's a movie within a movie. Does that make sense?
I've always thought of it as its own standalone because they
Yeah.
add
Oh
so
yeah.
much to the mythos. Like he had a sister, and they couldn't use the name just because of legal rights. But that is supposed to be the Kandarian dagger from the Evil Dead is what kills him. They couldn't use that name, just like they couldn't reference the Necronomicon because that studio didn't own those rights. But Adam Marcus himself, we were lucky enough to have him as a guest on the podcast, and he told us like he reached out to Sam Raimi, and Sam Raimi was like, "That's brilliant, I love it, go ahead." So he gave Raimi gave Marcus a copy of his Necronomicon to use in the movie. And the dagger, they couldn't call it the Kandarian dagger, but that's what it was. That's what's able to kill Jason because Jason is a Deadite. And I think that's fucking brilliant. It's its own movie. Don't look at it, like you said, don't look at it through the canon of the Friday the 13th series. Look at it as a Jason movie, not a Friday the 13th movie, as its own individual movie. It's fucking perfect. I love that movie so much, man.
What I respect about, and I don't like Jason Goes to Hell. I'm going to admit it. I'm not a big fan, but what I respect about it is I've seen Crystal Lake Memories and all that. And Adam Marcus is so passionate about what he was trying to accomplish with part 9. Cause we talked about that when we did that video series. So we got to part 9 and we talked about like how passionate this guy was about saying like, this is what I was going for. This is why I made these choices. And there's a level of respect to that because it's a 9th part in a Jason movie. Like any director in the world could have bopped in and been like, yeah, slashing, whatever, and then give me my paycheck and I'm out of here. But no, like he cared, like he really, really had just intense emotion for what he was making. And, that's great. That's great.
I agree with you. Now, we talked about your first horror movie, which was Friday 7. We talked about your favorite movie in that franchise. Usually my little buddy Ghostface is here, but I'm out of town right now and he's out filming Scream 7. So he gave me permission to ask you this next question. Usually he's here to do it for me, but now I'm going to be Ghostface. What's your favorite scary movie, Robert? What is your favorite horror movie of all time?
That's hard. That's hard because objectively to me, Halloween 78 is the best horror movie of all time. And it's the movie, and it's not even the horror movie, it's the movie I've seen more than any other movie in my world. Does that mean it's my favorite though? I don't know. I really enjoyed Cabin in the Woods. I think just the meta aspect of that, it's to get my wife to go to the movie theater twice to see the same movie is impossible. But she went to the theaters twice to see Cabin in the Woods, and we agree on how much we love that. So that's way up there. If not my favorite, that's way up there. And honestly, another weird, like kind of horror comedy I've seen way too many times in love, Happy Death Day. I think Happy Death Day is amazing. I wish Jessica Roth had been in every movie in the world after that movie came out because she's such a standout in that. So Halloween's the champion. Halloween is the best, but maybe one of those two would be my favorite.
Cabin is fucking brilliant. Yes. I went into that movie with the lowest amount of expectations because the trailer showed you nothing. You hear the title Cabin in the Woods. You think it's going to be just a generic...
It's the most generic name in the world.
That movie blew my mind. Leaving that movie, it's super smart. It's scary. Sitterson and Hadley are two of the funniest people in any horror movie ever. I love those two. They're great. When he finally sees the merman, he's like, oh, come on. Like, it's so great. So, man, I really did have a great time with you talking about these things and, learning about you, not just, before we got to actually recording, learning about more of who you are as a person. But before I let you go, we always bounce back to the same question. We're going to go back to A New Blood. And what we're going to do is rank this movie on a skull count. Now, we're not ranking it on acting, production, score, direction, nothing like that. All we're doing is ranking A New Blood on how much it affected you on your first viewing. So 0 skulls being not effective, 5 being extremely effective. You can use half and quarter skulls anywhere in the middle. Robert, what would your ranking of Friday the 13th Part 7 be?
I mean, honestly, even on an enjoyment or a quality level, I would give this movie 3.5. But on a how it affected me level, I mean, it's ridiculously has to be at least a 4.5 because I've watched the entire Friday the 13th franchise so many times in my life. And I grew up and I mean, I watched the Freddy movies, I watched the Michael movies, I watched the Chucky movies, but it always came back to Jason for me. Like, that was my horror franchise. That was the one that meant the most to me. To this day, I think it's the best of all of them. I love it. And I tell people this, and like, for the first 25, 30 years of my life, at least once a year, I would have a nightmare that Jason was trying to kill me. And it's because I watched these movies when I shouldn't have been. But
Sure.
I mean, it's an impact, like it's an effect it had on me. So, I mean, it's got to at least be a 4.5. I love these movies, and I don't know if I would really be a big horror fan without the Friday the 13th franchise. And this is the first one I remember watching in its entirety. So
And that's the thing. That's another reason I really love this is would we be the same people we are today had we not seen that first horror movie? You know, so I did say it at the beginning, guys, but we are at the end of the third act. The credits are about to roll and the curtain's about to drop. But before that happens, I have all of Robert's social media links down in the description. So make sure you're following him on social media, subscribing to the podcast, and checking out the website. Not only so you can see the things that he has done, but you can be up to date on all the things he's working on in the future. So, Robert, please don't go anywhere. I got a couple more questions for you. Everybody else, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. It really does help the channel more than you know. And follow Sledgehammer Horror on social media. All our links are in the description as well. But until next time, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.